See, that's interesting.
For some students, getting it done is the
doesn't
accomplishment.
necessarily mean the same thing.
That's
as
true.
good, right?
Accurate doesn't mean no.
Accurate doesn't always mean the same thing. So things can be, these are the facts on paper, but am I hearing you very clearly? Do I think you really believe these things? Is this a good paper? Am I engaged? Versus, are you saying all of the right things? That is also tough.
And I think the hardest thing like I learned was not every student wants to be or is achieving or is striving to be an A student.
Okay.
Like some students, just like Angela was saying, some just want to pass the class.
What about the ones who don't show up and then they finally show up and they're playing games on their computer? I had that.
Well, that's a part
It's a
of my
heartbreaker.
next question.
Nice transition.
That was a great
Oh, it's a
caveat.
killer.
Which is, so
demoralizing.
if you're noticing that there are students that are showing up, they're engaging with AI during class. I've been on the other side, and I know that people are using ChatGPT and other, not even just large language models, bots of all kinds, while we're on the other side, right? Because
Wait, on the same subject matter?
no. So sometimes not. They're just engaging in the use of AI during classes, right? So people just can't stay away from it. Sometimes while a professor is actively teaching, I have seen the questions that are being asked live be typed into a large language model, and then the person regurgitate the answer that comes up on the screen. I've seen disastrous things. But so if you're aware that these things are happening, you're seeing that students are using phones and computers in class, how are you getting them to unplug and engage?
So
while
the
we're
key
in
word
class?
is unplug. So day one, I have instituted in my syllabus that no electronics shall be allowed in class. And if they are on phone or laptop, they will not receive credit for attendance because officially they're not there. However, that being said, this mystifies me that a quarter of the students, each class will come, first thing they do, open their computers. Now, we've been through this on day one, so I don't understand what's going on. But that's been my way of handling it. Yeah.
Would you say that you're anti-AI in the classroom?
Oh, I'm all for information. I think it's fine if students are learning from AI, but my feeling is that most of them don't make the time to read. I don't think they're reading really well.
That was a segue question, because my actual question then, if, since that is your answer, is then how would you foresee yourself introducing AI in the classroom for it to be a helpful tool while you're teaching?
I would
modern,
defer to your-
in modern drama, for example, what is maybe some way that you think that there actually are benefits to using AI to teaching a subject like
I mean, if you consider AI, you type in a question, is that what you're considering AI? I mean, we all do that. So,
that? Oh, you mean like when you're typing in Google,
like,
it
what did
automatically uses
Pirandello?
Gemini?
Yeah. So the modern drama survey students are now writing on Pirandello and comparing it with Brecht and whatever. What did Pirandello add to modern drama? I have no problem if they're finding information. I mean, in the old days, we would do the same thing in the encyclopedia. So it's not, the problem is not getting information. I feel the problem is not doing the reading.
It goes back to, I forget it was The Atlantic, or I don't know. These pieces come out. The Atlantic actually just did a piece on AI, but like
the other week.
yes, but like also the rate of literacy. Like I think this is also something that is not being addressed, or there's a lot that has to be addressed in the K to 12 level, specifically like how students show up to college. And like if they haven't been closely reading and analyzing and feeling confident in their skills, unfortunately there's not going to be a turnaround like automatically that in college they're going to become expert close readers if they've been using these tools to do the close reading for them.
Oh, the other problem, tell me if this is off track, is that I also, day one, say only hard copies of books, no electronic copies of books, because you never know if they're actually on the text or they're with their friends and conversation.
Even if not,
And
it's
inevitably,
controversial.
students will not obey that rule, and I don't know whether it's an economic thing, they will not buy hard copies. And it's instituted in the syllabus, I don't
Well,
get it.
if I can interject, just
Yeah.
since you brought it up, sometimes it is an economic issue. And actually, we heard in the keynote this morning that, you know, if we go by the UEL approach, that if you guys are familiar, that someone could argue maybe, and tell me anyone here if I'm wrong, that that is maybe not so UPL centered, like that maybe it's not an accommodation, which can also become tough because we want there to be hard copies. And so then we have to figure out how can we make having hard copies so we can keep the integrity in its classroom, but then also making sure that we accommodate for economic issues, accessibility issues, et cetera, et cetera.
I actually, so it's interesting, it's an interesting point. So I actually have tried to move towards OER, like open educational resources,
Oh, that's the other side.
because I feel like a lot of those books, materials are actually very well done, and I support them, I think they're great, and
Why
they're
do none of them
totally
have
free.
line numbers though?
What was that?
Wait, you mean
The poetry
they're all
never has
digital?
line numbers. It drives me crazy.
Oh, I know, you're right, that is true.
It makes me insane.
That is true. Actually, I'm using a book now that doesn't have page numbers, so there's no page
no.
numbers. That actually, that's driven me insane.
So OER is all
Paradise
digital.
Lost without line
Yeah,
numbers.
or like
So I don't think students register what they read. I
So,
really don't.
so here's the thing.
Yes,
So
exactly.
what I do in one of my classes, actually this class does have a hard copy book, but there's an online version. But so here's what I do. Like regarding reading, I agree that most students do not read. So I try to like find ways to force them to read. So one thing I do is I also do a lot of physical, like in-person writing. But I also have discussion leaders in some of my classes. So they're required for that week's material, they need to present it to the class. So even if they're using AI to like give them synopsis or whatever, even if they're not really reading it, they're doing something, at least they have to read it over because they need to actually say it to the class.
Yes.
And then they need to come up with discussion questions to help facilitate and guide a dialogue in the classroom. So they need to like give a summary of the reading material, then they need to come up with 3 to 4 discussion questions, and they need to actually like lead the class in a discussion. And then they need to do a reflection on their own by the next class where they write like a few paragraphs about their experience doing this. And I have to say, I found it to be really beneficial. I also do not support a lecturing model. So this was also a way that I didn't have to lecture and they could lecture instead. But I actually was thinking about the fact that no one reads, and I was trying to come up with like creative ways to like at least engage them more. And I think that this has been really helpful. And the reflections I've gotten back have been really like rewarding for me to read. Like people say that they have learned new skills and new traits, and they understand the importance of communicating, and that it's actually not that easy, that they watch other people talk, like they watch me talk, and they're like, oh, that seems so easy, but then they're in front of the class, and they're like, wow, this is really hard to communicate well.
But don't you find that being on a digital page, it doesn't lend itself to retention?
So, I mean, it depends. So I also require annotations. I actually like Hypothesis for social annotations so people can see all the annotations. But I always require, when I do ask for readings, I require annotations. And so I let them do that
On the
however they
digital,
want.
on the
Well, I let them do it however they want. So I say to them, they can like handwrite, they can print out the pages, they can handwrite, take a picture, upload that to like whatever learning management, tool we're using. Or they can highlight and then put notes. They can do like just like type up notes in a Word doc or a Google Doc. So I do require annotations. Now again, of course they could use AI to do that. They could input the material to AI and then just have them give notes. But I think the more steps I require from them, I think at the very least, hopefully they're even reading AI's output,
And I also find too that if the student has, there's an electronic text and an electronic text, right? There's the one that's on the laptop screen that's tilted up so you can't see what they're doing. But there's also the student who has it on a tablet that's using an annotation program like Holonote that allows them essentially to annotate the text the way they would a hard copy. So most of our university Seton Hall students get laptops as part of their undergraduate program. Those can generally flip and be used in tablet mode. So I kind of say they have to use the text in tablet mode. And then there's the kid who comes with their own Mac, and it's like, I can't do that, and it doesn't annotate, and it's not a touch screen, and it's like, well, then you need to go buy the book, honey.
It seems unfair that we cannot request that they buy a hard copy. I had
I think we
students
can
who didn't know
request
what
it,
a
but I
hard
think
copy
we have
meant.
to
They thought it meant a
understand
hardback.
Oh,
yeah.
So funny. So,
So-
actually, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
We're actually gonna have Dr. Balkan's clip play from the podcast, and then I'm going to give her a formal introduction.
Uh-huh.
That, okay, we've been talking about the elimination of jobs. I'm frankly more
Yes, we
concerned with the pylon. That we keep hearing that, okay, this is going to make your job easier, this is going to free up more of your time. I think that's frankly a crock. Because what's going to happen, we've seen it happen over and over, we saw it happen with computing in general, we saw it with email, we've seen it with every tech innovation that's come along. The reason we are all out of our minds busy these days is because every time something comes along that is supposed to make our lives easier, it opens the door for someone to say, okay, so now that you've got this thing that makes your life easier, now you can do this too. And that's what's happening. It's just that pylon of work, and it happens everywhere. It's not just out in the business world, it happens in academia as well, right? So, well, of course, if you have this tool that can help you give feedback on student papers, well, then that means, you know what, I can raise your class size from 25 to 35 because you don't have to do that work. The work is easier for you now, and we're hearing that.
Or it gives you a higher course load, which
Absolutely.
I think is out of the question.
Absolutely. Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
no, not at all, not at all. Yeah, no, you're right. And so I don't think that's something, and I heard that concern very early on, like late 22, 23. Again, I know that AI has been around for a long time. It just kind of hit the general public consciousness at that moment. But it's, yeah, and it hasn't, I haven't heard it since. I mean, I keep bringing it up because I keep thinking, I see it in my own life. The more something is supposed to make your life easier. I was talking to a colleague who's actually from Italy, and she's here at the university as an international scholar, and I said, we are not looking to a shift to the culture of a place like Italy, or France, or others, many other countries that have that break in the middle of the day. Spain, right? You're gonna have a moment where life becomes less hectic. That is not the United States. That is not the United States. The rule here is do more, do it faster, do it better. That's what makes you a success.
Yes. You're here.
Yes, it's okay, it's okay. She did.
We're getting into the lot of podcasts.
That's what the podcast is for. Oh my goodness. Mary McNair Balkan is professor of English at Seton Hall University. She is a scholar of early American literature with articles in journals and edited volumes. She is the author of The American Counterfeit, Authenticity and Identity in American Literature and Culture, and co-editor of several volumes, including The Companion to American Poetry, Transformative Digital Humanities, Projects, Case Studies and Challenges, and Women of the Early Americas and the Formation of Empire. Her current projects are Indelible Connections, Familial Correspondence in Long 18th Century America, and New World Upside Down, The Early American Grotesque. Okay.
Should have made that shorter, but the book is long on me.
Yeah. Sid, that's perfectly fine. You're in a room that will love your long silence, so don't worry. So on your episode, as you saw, well, a little later actually, we discussed there being a place for AI in the humanities. I'm sorry. There being a place for AI, but the humanities not being that space. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you could expand more on that idea, and then I'll go into it.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier that, I do think it's inevitable in many ways. I do think we're going to have to learn how to deal with it. That doesn't necessarily mean we need to be teaching students how to use it. I mean, frankly, my own feeling is that, so critical thinking is at the heart of every single thing you do. I honestly don't believe students should be using it to do brainstorming or outlining or anything else. That is mental production. And if somebody else is doing that production for you, you are not learning that skill. I just had this conversation with someone recently where they were saying, actually it was at the NIML conference I was just at, and somebody in the session was talking about how, I use AI and I use it to do these things. And so I said, yeah, but you are how old? How well educated? How much critical thinking practice have you had in your life? our 18, 19, 20-year-old students, who seem younger every year, by the way, are not, this is what they are learning how to do now, right? So they do not have the expertise to look at a bibliography that has been generated by AI and realize, oh, that doesn't look quite right. Like maybe that's not right. Maybe that's made up. They don't
write that article that said I wrote.
They don't recognize the right. They don't recognize the repetitions, the redundancies, the terrible flat writing that AI produces. So, I mean, ultimately, my feeling is that every single thing in one of my English classes should be generated by them. Every bit of writing, every bit of thinking, because that's what we are training them to do. And frankly, we're doing the work that people in other disciplines are going to be benefiting from. Because if they're not doing it with us, they are certainly not doing it in your history class or your science class or your business class, right? I mean, we are the front line for teaching students how to do this stuff. So I hold the line at this point. As I said, I presented to my grad class, but I thought, are there ways? And I was really open to the idea of some suggestions of, well, maybe you could do it. I get information, right? I get background. You know, what's the difference between, well, there is a difference, by the way. Wikipedia is actually written by people and edited by people who then catch mistakes, and you see those little notices that say, this is a stub entry, and this doesn't have citations. And exactly. So, hell, I'd rather they use Wikipedia now than AI, right? I mean, you know, we're kicking against Wikipedia.
Yeah, Wikipedia.
Yeah, exactly. So much better. So
It has gotten better.
right. So I think for myself at least, I can see that there's going to have to be ways. I think about it and figure out how to deal with it and address it. I'm just still at this point of thinking, I don't want them using it.
Oh, okay. So you just set a perfect scene for us.
Thank you.
So now
Anything for you, Amina.
So let's play with the idea a little bit. Let's go back in time now. It's 2000 and Wikipedia has just hopped on the scene. And our teachers, if you use Wikipedia, you're grabbed by the throat. By looking at you guys who are, I know, are my age. Don't use Wikipedia because you're going down. And right now that's how we're treating AI, right? Don't use AI. But now we've gotten to a place 25 years later where we're all agreeing that, hey, Wikipedia is actually can be good. There's human intervention, there's a grading scale, there's some type of regulation maybe. It's low stakes, but it's regulation.
Right.
Is there a space in the future? And I'm not asking you to like Marvel predict this. But do
Yeah,
you,
my crystal ball.
do you imagine that maybe there is a space with, some type of human implementation? And us very people in this room, where this would have a non-threatening presence in the discipline? No.
I think so. And I think, I forget who mentioned it earlier, but I think part of the problem we're facing is coming up from, and God, I taught grade school for a number of years. I've had nothing but sympathy for my high school, my colleagues who teach in high school and so on, but K to 12. Because students are coming out of there telling us, well, I used Grammarly in high school. Well, first of all, it's not the same Grammarly anymore, kids. It doesn't just fix your grammar and spelling now, it actually rewrites for you. So that's changed. But that's what we're hearing, right? And okay, so I was in an open house 2 years ago, and a student asked, so I was talking about my American novel class and what I would do, usually try to tell them what happens in an English class. And a young woman raised her hand and said, I said, we read novels. She said, so do you read them in class or outside of class? And I just looked at her. It took a while for my brain to compute that question, like, excuse me? What does that mean? And I said, because I know that a lot of reading in high school actually happens in class. It's the only way they can get them to read and so on. So this is, and again, pache to my colleagues from K to 12, but this is what we're up against. So I think until this starts happening at the lower levels where issues of ethics and what it is useful for or not useful for are being addressed, I think we, again, are on the front line of saying, no, absolutely not. We're taking you right back to square one. And this is going to be where we're going to start here. You need to learn how to do this and this and this. And you need to show me that you can do it. I do in-class writing. I do presentations. I do the turning the presentations into papers. And so last semester, I had a small class, and it's possible with small classes. So rah-rah small classes. Everybody's presentation got feedback from everybody in the class. Everybody's paper got read by everybody in the class, not just one or two people. Everyone read it. I teach for 2.5 hours blocks all the time. They only have half hour, come back, talk about it, and at the bottom of the sheet that I handed out with all the guidelines, it said, and be warned, literally. It said, and be warned. I will not be the only person reading your paper or evaluating your presentation. Though all of us will be doing it. We all know what you sound like. We all know your level of discourse, your vocabulary. You're gonna have to fool all of us. And you know what? I believe from not a single one do anything. I'm also a little scary sometimes, so that's part of it too. But I do think the eyes on it, being able to say, everyone's looking at it, and if you're going to try to get away with it, you know, say it's your, well, no offense, but say it's your paper, and I'm reading, I'm like, listen, you. I might not say it in class, but I might take you aside later and say, you're gonna be in big trouble. So,
I think because there's a general level of shame.
Yes,
for,
I
like,
agree.
Mediocrity, or we're all sitting here and we all have to do the same thing to get here, so why do you get now to, cheap out on it? That's not
Absolutely.
fair.
Yep.
And just being authentic. There's shame.
Absolutely.
You don't want to be the person shaming others, but if we're like, hey, everyone in here is going to be holding you accountable,
Yes.
and we're not afraid to say, you're my friend, but I can tell you use AI to write this.
Absolutely.
When there's that fear there that may happen pretty much at all costs.
So there's a distinction between using AI for information and using AI for writing.
Right.
We're making a distinction.
Right,
Yes.
yes. I think for basic information, but again, it's so often wrong. It just is. I mean, I can't tell you how many times you almost can't help, well, we can't. This is part of the challenge too, right? No matter where we go now, it's always there, right? The minute I went to Google, suddenly AI, and then AI wants to, do you want to do a deeper dive?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Go away. So it's hard to avoid. It's hard to avoid.
I want to ask you about the newly formed committee on AI here at Seton Hall.
Right.
If you're not familiar, hopefully Dr. Baldwin can talk to us a little bit about it and just describe, I don't know how we're doing on time, so maybe briefly, some of your personal goals for the committee and what contributions you personally estimate humanity is supposed to make to a committee like this.
Okay, yes, so the university started what they're calling an AI Advisory Council. There are about 18 of us on it from across the university, faculty, some staff. There are no students on it at the moment, but students are going to be part of the process. For me, I think the main thing is putting people from the humanities and the sciences and the social sciences at the same table to have these conversations. Because I do think inadvertently we are being pitched against one another, right? Because the sciences, the business folks, they are being pushed to use it and being told your students must know how to do this before they go out into the world. And I always go back to this whole idea of, well, you know what? They learn pretty darn fast, frankly, technology, much faster than most of us do. I don't think there's going to be a problem, but okay, fine. And then you've got humanities folks who are generally the ones saying, hell no. We've got faculty colleagues in philosophy and religion and history saying, I'm just not assigning papers anymore. That's it. Like, okay, this is a problem. So what I really like is for the people on the one side, and again, primarily, really a lot of it is business, the business folks, and again, love my business colleagues, but you need to be supporting us on your side, saying, what you're allowed to do in this class is this, what you're allowed to do in this class is this, and students need to check their syllabus, make sure they know what's proper use and not proper use. We have English colleagues who use it, have students use it in class, and they have legitimate reasons for doing it. But I think part of it is we've been made into antagonists in this battle. And I think that's bad. I think if we're all at the same table saying, okay, how do we do the best thing for our students at this really fraught and confusing and frankly terrifying moment? Right. So to me, that would be a big outcome, and some sort of university policy, because we don't have one. To the extent you could have a university-wide policy about any of this.
And I'm just curious, and again, if you don't want to speak, this is more of an administrative maybe question, Mary, but do you think that younger faculty, like myself and others, are kind of being, not coerced, because that sounds kind of nefarious, but are also positioned to really be at the forefront of understanding AI because of the shifting job security of like entering the profession, or saying, well, I know how to do AI literacy skills, and they can we can put that into our portfolio of sorts.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and I think also senior faculty are in a much better position to say, no. If you're a tenured full professor, It's easier to just say, no, I'm not going to do that. But on the other hand, I will tell you that the closest I ever came to thinking about retirement was January of 2023. Because I already started reading like November, it came out of 22. November, December, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I've been through the paper mills, the sorority fraternity filings, writing papers, buying, so having your friend write it for you, buying it on a paper mill. I thought, I just can't deal with this. I cannot deal with this new form of plagiarism. My brain can't wrap myself around. So yes, I agree. I think younger faculty, early career faculty are certainly, I think, probably more open to this stuff than many of us are. I don't know. And also are really in a dicier position. So I would ask if other people feel the same way, if you're farther along in your career. But I also feel that way.
Do want to acknowledge, I love what you said about like each of us, right? We could each, all up here, teach the same course, and each of us are going to have varying policies and etiquette in the classroom. Like, I give Jan credit with the cell phone and laptop policy because
Doesn't work, so don't worry.
Well, but like I think also having the students really understand classroom etiquette and like what each professor is presenting and what goes in the classroom is maybe something that's not being addressed. Is like, okay, well, Stephanie allows it for this process, but Mary doesn't. I just need to know which classroom I'm in.
Right. Which could be confusing. That could be confusing, for sure.